Okay, today we're going to be talking about domain and range. I want you to have a highlighter or some color. We are going to focus the domain in yellows. So if you are ever given just a scatter plot or just a table, then you are going to do your domain and range as a list like I'm going to do here. If you are given a table and an equation, or a table and a graph that we've connected the dots, you are going to do it using inequality signs. But for a scatter plot or table only, you are going to list it this way. With my yellow, I am going to draw a line through each one of my points. Now notice I'm drawing those lines vertically because I want them to go through the x-axis, because domain is my x value. Now I'm going to list every single x value. This one is at -1, 2, 3. This one is at -2. This one is at -1. Again, we're focusing on the x values. That one is at 0, 1, 2, and 3. I know, I'm running out of room here. Sorry. Alright, so that gives me my domain. I have to list them specifically because they are specific points. We did not connect them, so all the numbers in between them don't count. Alright, I'm going to use green to do the range on this one. So I'm going to do the same thing. I am starting at the bottom and drawing a line through each point. Okay, so now I'm going to list them. Starting at the bottom, -3, -2, -1. We're skipping 0 and going straight to a +1, +2, +3, and +4. So that is my domain and range. Sorry, I have a hard time writing small with the stylus. So let's look at number 2. What happens when it's not a scatter plot or a table? We actually have connected points on the graph. So I have domain. I am going to find the far left side of my graph, and I'm going to draw a line. Then I'm going to find the far right side of my graph, and I'm going to miss the point entirely. Sorry. There we go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use my green, and I'm going to draw the bottom of this little box through my bottom of the graph, and I'm going to do the same thing through the top of the graph. Okay. Now, looking for my domain, we are going to look at the smallest and the biggest numbers. I'm writing over those because we're not concerned about those notations, those terms. Alright, so to find the left side of my domain, I'm going to look at the left side of my box, right here. Okay, so that yellow line is going through the number -3. Is -3 included? If I erase that little spot right there, you notice it is an open dot. That means it is not included, so I'm just using a less than symbol. What about the right side over here? That tells me what number to put on the right side of my notation. I'm going to put a +3. And again, if we erase that little spot, we erase that little spot, it is an open dot. Alright, so now we're going to go to the range. I'm going to focus on my green lines. Since I'm doing range, I'm using Y instead of X for my notation. The bottom of my box is going through -4, so that is going to be here on the left. The top of my box is going through 0, right here, so that is the right side. I am not including the -4 or the 0 because I do not have closed-in dots. Alright, so let's look at number 3. Okay, again, I'm going to start with my yellow. So I go over to the far left, and I find the far left, and I draw a line through it. Now when I come over here, the far right, I've got an arrow right here. That arrow, if it keeps going, is going to bust through the right side of my make-believe box. So since it's going to bust through, I'm not going to draw that line. I'm going to go ahead and do my green. I'm going to draw the bottom of my, oops, need to go up a little bit. Draw the bottom of my box. But again, when I go to draw the top of my box, same thing. I have this arrow, and if it would keep going, it would bust through the top of the box. So we're not going to draw the top of the box. Now, that's okay that we don't have lines, because the fact that the lines aren't there, it's going to tell us something. So I'm going to go ahead and start looking for my domain, x less than, less than. The left side of my box, the smallest number, is going through -2. And I'm looking right here for that number. And since I don't have a line on the right side, that is going to infinity. Okay, so no line means infinity. Now, looking at my -2, I have to come down here to the dot. It is an open dot, so I'm not going to include a line underneath. It's just less than. It is not less than or equal to. All right, now let's look at the range. Y with a less than on both sides. As long as you do the smallest on the left and the biggest on the right, you can always use less than symbols. So I am going to look here. The smallest number is -8. It is an open dot, so I do not put a line under it. Then I come up here to the top. I do not have the top of my box drawn, so it is a positive infinity. All right, let's look at number 4. Taking my yellow, I am going to look over here at the right side, or the left side, sorry, but I notice I have an arrow drawn here, which means I can't draw the left side. So I go to the right side. Well, I have an arrow here also, so I cannot draw the left or the right of my box. So looking at my range, I go to the bottom. Well, again, I have arrows, so I can't draw the bottom of my box. Go to the top. I do have a top of my graph that does not have arrows, so I'm going to draw the top. Now you may say, well, we don't have any sides, so how do we know what to do? Well, remember, when there are no sides or are no lines, that does tell us what to do. Since I do not have a left side of my box drawn, this is going to be negative infinity. We never put a bar underneath, we never do equal to infinity, because infinity is not a specific number. When I look over here to the right side, I also don't have a line, I just have an arrow, so this is positive infinity. So arrows are infinity. Going to my range, I don't have the bottom of the box, so that is negative infinity. I do have the top of the box though, and that is through the number 4. Now, I have to ask myself, does this get an equal to, less than, or equal to, or just a less than? Since there is not an open dot at that point, and there's not an arrow at that point, it is going to be equal to 4. That means this dot right here is actually a point on my graph. The ordered pair 0, 4 is actually a point on my graph, so we include it. All right, let's look at number 5. Remember, pause at any time to review a problem. Okay, so let's take our yellow color. I want to draw a line over here, but if you notice, I have an arrow, so I can't. I want to draw a line on the right side, but again, I have an arrow, so I can't. So let's go to our range. I want to draw a line down here at the bottom, but I have an arrow, so I can't, because it's going to bust through the box. I want to draw a line on top, but I have an arrow, so I can't, because it's going to bust through the top of the box. So as you look at this, you might think, well, I don't have anything to work with. Well, you do. The lack of lines tells you what to work with. So on the left side, I have no arrow. No arrow means infinity. And since it's going to the left, the direction left is negative. Okay, so let's do the same thing on the right. I'm looking for the line on the right, but there's not one. So that is positive infinity. So see, the lack of lines tells us what we need to put. We need to put infinity. Okay, the lack of a line on bottom tells me that I have negative infinity on the left side of my range, and the lack of a line on top tells me I have positive infinity on the right side of my range. So another way you can do this is both of these. You could also say all real numbers, which is displayed by this funky little R. That is all real numbers. And that is a number symbol, not a hashtag. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to number 6. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, this was the one I was supposed to do on Friday, and I just have had the toughest time getting it done.
So I started my new workout program yesterday.
Which one is it?
Dying.